Welcome to the Equipping Leaders Podcast Leader Study Series. I'm Natasha, a leader development professional and overall leadership enthusiast.
And I'm Corey, a program manager and an emerging people leader, thus a leadership enthusiast.
We're doing a leader study of the TV show Z Nation, deconstructing the leaders, decisions, and team dynamics of the characters on the show to look at how leadership is all around us. And even if we're not in a position of leadership, we can still demonstrate it in our actions, responses, and opportunities.
Z Nation aired from 2014 to 2018, but if you haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers in these episodes. In this episode, we're talking about Season 3, Episode 8, Election Day, and Episode 9, Heart of Darkness. Let's jump in.
So we're in Season 3, and now we get to take kind of a little pivot from our main story, and we get a little bit of a side story in this episode, Election Day. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What stood out to you leadership-wise in this episode?
So within this one, right, like you said, it's a side story. It's with the Skeezy and Sleazy, and they are, I guess you'd call it running a grift, right? So they're grifting out these people, and they are pretending to be the presidential candidates, right, for this new country that they're going to build post zombie apocalypse. And what I think is funny is they apparently went to the Clinton Library, stole the presidential limousine that was on display there. So they've gotten like this, they look the part, right? And what I thought was so interesting about that from a leadership perspective is I've met those leaders, right? The ones that kind of just have the pieces, and they, Skeezy and Sleazy are they're saying all of those kind of glittering generality things that's just like the right buzzwords, and everything that they want to do is completely adapted around the problems that are coming in, which great leadership skill, right? You're going to adapt to what you need, but not the way that they're doing it. And what I thought was really interesting is met those people time and time again, right? The nice suit, the know all the right buzzwords. And I just thought that was really interesting because you had Doc and Addie they're just along, right? They're coming along to make sure that they don't cause too much trouble, essentially, right? So they're playing along a little bit because they kind of need a break. But I just thought it was so interesting, that whole false front of leadership, and I'm sure you've seen it too. So I didn't know what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen it too. I agree that the ability to adapt, a great leadership skill, and also the way they go about it, wildly toxic and abusive. So, and I think that there is that thing though, where it's an old mindset of if you look the part, then, act as if, fake it till you make it. And all of those things are inherently empty and don't actually get to the depth and get to the real work and the real results of what leadership or what anything actually is. Because you can have a great suit and maybe you're valuable, but it also could just be performative. And I think I've said it in the past too, where like performative is not helpful. That doesn't help anybody. Like it's not moving anything forward. It is a dog and pony show. And I know that there are some, it's claimed that at some levels of leadership and that in some industries that is something that's really important. And to me, that is absolutely, I am flabbergasted because you care more about putting on a show than you do about doing the work. That's what you're saying, is that, yeah, we're going to, blow smoke and do all these different things because then maybe we'll get to some work. But it's kind of like when people go through something and they're telling you all the great things they're going to do. Cool. Go do those things and then let your results speak for you. Let the results be what you come tell me about what's actually been accomplished, instead of just all this, again, performative. Let me use all the right buzzwords, but inherently not saying anything.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting. They are targeting like a desperate group of people, right? That just are looking for any sort of answer. And that's there's those people, right, that target those sort of things. And I I think of it as those emails that I don't know if you get them on your like corporate email. I think working for somebody smaller than you work for, right? I see them more often. Not as strong a firewall, we'll call it, but the like, improve we don't do sales, right? But like improve your sales 90% with this book, right? Like I've been selling for everyone, you know what I mean? Like Jeff Bezos calls me for advice type thing, and it's just that spam out, and it's that allure of like the fast easy life hack, and you and I talked about that on a personal level the other day, and that's just sort of that whole thing that runs through my mind is like those people that can go from I'm a leader realizing that they're out of their depth, and then oh nope, I'm just going to coach, or I'm going to advise or mentor or something like that, you know what I mean? They do that role shift thing just to try to stay relevant.
So I definitely, yeah. So like I get those on LinkedIn all the time. They're like,
Yeah.
increase this. And it's like, I don't have that. Like that's
Yeah.
not a thing. So thank you. But no, thank you. But I think also like within leadership, you are doing that coaching, advising, mentoring. But I think that when
Absolutely.
people step to the side and they're like, ah, but I know what you mean. It's like, again, they could not get results for themselves. So now they're like, oh, I could probably get results for somebody else. Let me just give you this formula. Everybody loves a formula. They love a framework. And Jocko Willink talks about this on his podcast, where it's like people, they want an easy hack. They just want an easy hack. He's like, and life doesn't have easy hacks. Like, that's not how life works. Things don't like work out for you. You make them work for you. And so I think that's like another big thing where when I see great leaders, they are putting in that work. They are putting in the effort, they're putting in the work, they're getting results. And if they're not getting results, they accept the L and they're like, okay, how do I make it better for next time? Right. So still learning through that, but not being like, oh, well, I mean, it might work for somebody else. Like focus in.
Yeah.
Another piece here that I really thought was interesting was the mayor of that town, who she didn't stand against sleazy and skeezy, but she was not supporting what they were doing either. And so what I thought was so interesting about her role was that she saw that she didn't have the influence that she needed to keep her people motivated and keep them moving forward. But she was also very wise in let people make their choices, right? I'm not going to try to dissuade you from something that you want to do. But at the same time, I'm not going to leave you when this whole thing falls out from under you. I am your mayor. And I'm still interested. Again, they're working on this like dog and pony show. And she's working on, oh, people are dying. This is actually causing a real serious problem. Like, what do we do about that? So what I appreciated about her and her role there was just sometimes leadership isn't not that it is necessarily the banging on your chest, being out there in front of everybody type of thing. Sometimes it's, hey, I don't have control of all these people, because you can't control people. They feel a certain way. That's fine. I'm not going to abandon them. It's not like my way or nothing. But this is a problem that's impacting these people. And that's what I'm more interested in solving. So sometimes it's more about giving people what they need versus what they want.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting too is I think Doc, as a good sort of leader, was able to identify that, right? That there was this need, medical need, or what have you, and wanted to get to the root of that problem, right? Because I think he also realized that desperation that people had because everyone was getting sick, it was opening them up to, you know, more alternatives than what was probably like sound judgment. And I think that was, I think, you know, when we talk about um, those unsung heroes of leadership, right? And you don't always have to be in necessarily a leadership position to be a leader. I think that's sort of what was the exemplar from what Doc was doing, right? He was able to see who really had the best intentions of the group in mind and was able to work to help support them without doing anything that ran counter to, you know, skeezy and sleazy's grift, you know? And I think that's that's that kind of what do you want to call it? Like fair judgment. You know what I mean? Where nobody was getting hurt, but everybody was going to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that Doc is such a great character on this show, because not only is he just like likable as all heck, but he is that leader who meets the moment. And I think that's something that a lot of leaders don't know how to do. Like whatever happens, it doesn't change at his core who he is, which is a person who wants to help other people, who wants to find a solution and actually like move through it and move through it together. So that's something that I really admire about Doc as a character throughout this entire series, is that he shows up so consistently and is so reliable. And I think that's something that leaders need to remember, is that if you show up differently, if you show up panicked or you lose your mind when there's chaos, even a little bit, which a lot of people do. A lot of people do not know how to control that in themselves. But then it makes you inconsistent. It removes psychological safety. People don't feel like they can be creative. Like now they are just literally trying not to make you upset or trying to make you less upset. And so what are they not doing then? Their jobs. They're just emotionally babysitting you. And so I think that if leaders can think about it like that, where it's like, I am derailing everybody by not showing up consistently, by, not being professionally mature, then it's like, okay, so how do I show up consistently? You can get upset. You can get, you can be mad about things. You can be hurt by something, and all of that's fine. But that doesn't mean that you get to run around and, abuse people or ignore people or do any of that type of thing. And so that's why I think Doc, even though he's not in any official leadership type position, he is so good at meeting the moment, and he is so good at being consistent.
Yeah, no, he's and I think it's like that to me, that representation of where sometimes, especially being younger, it's like my hesitation might come from lack of actual experience, right? So I run into probably more problems that are new to me, that like say somebody like you who's we'll say slightly more advanced in their age than I am, right? So I think that there's things that you've seen before that are new to me, and it's like he's like that embodiment of like that old knowledge, right? Where it's not like you always have the best answer, but you at least have some recollection of what you did the last time. And that just, I think, allows you to make more micro adjustments than discovering or coming up with like a whole new idea for how to approach a problem. And I think that's like the embodiment that I always see from Doc, and why it's like, just keep an eye on him, because maybe he's not the de facto like Operation Bike Mark group leader right now, but he's been a leader of things in the past, which means he just kind of, he's somebody you can fall back onto. And I think we see Warren and Addie and everyone else sort of do that every once in a while. So, I had this obsession with the idea of like effective followership several years ago, like when I sort of started my leadership journey. And I think Doc is the true embodiment of what that whole concept was. And that was the point that I was missing. I was looking at it as like, if somebody just wants to chill out and hang out, why are you mad at them? But now I understand, it's that sometimes you're the leader and sometimes you're the follower. And how can you be that good follower? So yeah, interesting points,
I think also when you're talking about Doc and just his experience, I think that so some of its experience, each new encounter, each new scenario is in fact very new. And so I think that good leaders, and this is something Doc embodies, ambiguity. That's what life is, right? Like there are no two situations that are exactly the same, because there are different places in time, probably with different people involved in different companies and all that sort of stuff. So what I appreciate about what you said, though, is that, we have that experience, but really what we learned in that experience are skills, and we learn tools to now show up. So, hey, this thing that I did in my previous org is probably not going to work here. But the way I went about thinking that those critical thinking skills, the, adaptability, like those things, even though they are not as measurable, those are the things that I think make leaders, like you said, able to make those micro adjustments where you're like, oh yeah, that's not working. Do we let it keep going so that these people can experience failure? Is it low risk enough that that's okay here? Or is this something that we need to kind of get ahead of, or that I just need to grab onto and, take control of? So, yeah. So then we move into this next episode, which I think is a really interesting one, because we're now back in kind of our main story with we've got Murphy, Warren, all of them. And now we get to see kind of, we re-encounter Vasquez. And so I think that for me, there were a lot of interesting interactions between him and Hector now that were different sides of leadership. And so, but I'm going to open it up to you, because I know you had some thoughts about Murphy and Warren as well. So we're in episode 9 of season 3.
Interesting how you just skipped over Murphy yet again in this during his downward spiral, but we can gloss over that for now. So one of the things that stuck out to me sort of initially is we experienced this in different episodes, and we talked about it in our own episodes earlier on, is Murphy's a huge micromanager, right? And I think that's, in this instance, I think it's twofold. One, because we know with the vaccine, the Murphy vaccine, right, that it gives him some semblance of mind control over people. So it's very easy, but we talked about it, right? Needs more zombies in the moats. This thing's too low. He's doing things that he perceives to be what leaders or dictators do, which, the latter tends to be a little bit more on the truth side. But it's created, I think, amongst him this fear, because now that micromanaging, it's like nothing's ever good enough now, right? Like if he didn't do it, then it could not have been done right. And I think he's in at the point now with critical systems from the perspective of trying to get electricity going or security, that I think he has this tremendous fear where nothing's gonna be good enough. So he's constantly looking over his shoulder, and I think that's really starting to worry him. And then we know that Bite Mark, attempts to break in and get in, and he's making use of the privy, we'll call it, right? And that issue resolves itself, and that's like a very vulnerable moment for a human. And that's where he was, where we're all kind of most vulnerable. And Warren was right next to him, and he's convinced that Warren's trying to come and take him and kill him and do all those things. So I think that micromanagement piece, and the lack of trust that he was creating amongst his group, and his inability to trust himself and trust the people he's working with, I think that failure, the cracks are starting to form in that utopia that he's trying to create. And I think that's really interesting.
It just points to what can we control and what can we not control? And he's trying to control the things that are not controllable. And that will make a person crazy. We've seen those people who are so wrapped up in anxiety and just so wrapped up in internal chaos because they're trying to put these structures and these things around things that you cannot control. And that's where I think, Murphy was already on a downward spiral. Fine, there, I said it. But I think there is an element, though, of it's getting worse because he is trying to micromanage. He's trying to just grasp onto everything, and it's grasping and it's not holding.
No, yep. I think that's the big one. I also think you look at that, also that comparison that they keep doing as they kind of cut scenes. You go over to Warren, Sunmay, and Hector, and it's all three making decisions, all three, observing something, making a split second, the group making a split second decision of who should be, what's going on. And they're just moving very effectively because there's trust there. You know what I mean? There's a lot of trust between the three of them to identify situations, identify solutions, and they move very effectively. Versus a Murphy where all that information has to be fed back into one point and a decision pushed out, which is, less effective.
And shows a complete lack of trust,
yeah.
Right? When you don't trust people, inherently they will start to learn to not trust you. He is at an advantage because he has this mind control thing with many of them, but in a real environment, if you don't trusting behaviors lead to trusting results, and that's what you want. And so that can be really hard though for leaders to give up that. They feel like they're giving something up. They're giving up this control that they have. It's all in their head. They've never had the control, but that could be a real challenge though for a lot of leaders.
Yeah.
So this is also where Warren and the group, they need to find out who this Escorpion is, because they have Hector, who is the original Escorpion. And so they're like, is this just something that, and so Hector's concern is that it's like, this is this has propagated from my previous behavior. And so they're not sure if this is an actual person or if it's kind of like that whole like, oh, the CEO said, right? The first sergeant said, this person said, and that person never said it, or it was 10 people ago or something like that. So as they go and find this person, they do find out that it is Vasquez. He has taken over that role. And what I thought was really interesting was we have Hector, who previous person, he had a real like catalyst moment where he realized that the life he was living as a Scorpion was not how he wanted to continue to move forward. It didn't work for him anymore. So now he's part of this team, part of this other mission. And Vasquez, who was part of that group, has now gone over to this. And so when they first encounter each other, and Hector's like, are you sure you don't know who I am? And Vasquez says, and this is what I thought was so interesting. So Hector is in that moment, he's saying, are you sure you don't remember who I am? Not to necessarily challenge it, but to also be like, this, he's almost giving him an out. This could be my fault, right? If you just said that it was me, then, then we could move forward from here. But then Vasquez does something that I think very weak leaders do. People in positions of authority, I should say, when they're trying to lead by fear. And he says to him, I know who you are. You're one of those people who thinks they're better than me. And let me tell you something, Corey. I have literally had people, I have never talked to them before. I arrived at my, new unit, and they're like, oh, you think you're smarter than me? Hi, my name is Natasha. Can we get there first? So it was just interesting because when you see that, it's like this initial peacocking, essentially, to be like, are you going to challenge me? And then I'm going to do something in this moment where I have control of the environment to slap you down. So I thought that was really interesting because Hector was essentially standing up and being like, here to take responsibility. But then Vasquez's character was like, you think you're better than me? So I thought that was really interesting. I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
First of all, whenever somebody says like, oh, you think you're smarter than me or anything like that, what you gotta be is you gotta look kind of up and down real quick and say, no, but your pants are on backwards. Because what they're gonna do is panic and look down, then they look like double the fool. But anyway, yeah, no, yeah, that whole piece, and especially attempting to give him the out, right? But like he is so obsessed with this idea and this new persona that he's created for himself. I just I do think that I couldn't imagine being Hector, right? Because you have somebody who has reformed themselves from how, and I think we've talked about this before, where you might run into people in the past, like from your past, where you're not the same person anymore, right? You've matured, you're different. And I think what's really interesting for Hector is he made some bad decisions in life that he's trying to make amends for. And I couldn't imagine I think that's gotta suck as bad as being a leader in an organization and you made a bad call once, or maybe we'll call it like gave social license to bad behavior that you wanted to correct, but then somebody came back and said, well, you let so and so do this X amount of time ago. God, that's got to suck, because now you have all of this stuff that Vasquez is doing is under the guises of he created this position for him to be a terrible human being in. Hector did. And so it's like trying to fix that. It's like, just burn the whole place to the ground. We'll start over, right? It's your history just coming back to haunt you. So I do think that it shows a lot of strength that he's still trying to fix it, right? Because they could have walked away. They could have easily just avoided that and walked away, but he created a problem and he wanted to solve it once and for all. And I think that that's like what good leaders do.
Yes. And even when there's a moment where Warren tries to get Vasquez to remember who he is, and then her and Hector are kind of talking, she's just saying, like, here's what I think we need to do. And what I thought was so interesting was in that moment, again, Hector took full responsibility, realizing that this is my mess. I made this mess. I brought this upon everyone. So he kind of like puts Warren out in a way where she can't be the one who fixes it. He has to be the one who fixes it. And I thought that was just really interesting, because I think that there are also times where we see leaders and they are doing something and they're going about it alone. And we're like, that's crazy, because we want to help them. We want to support them. We're here as a team. But there are just times when we need to do that for ourselves, right? We need to remedy this for ourselves. And we don't want any more people to be collateral damage in our decisions. And if we're not exactly sure how to move forward and do that well, we tend to just try to clear the path and be like, just get behind me, right? Like, just get behind me. And, whatever this is, I am willing to face it, but you shouldn't have to do that, in realizing that I've already caused all this damage. So I thought Hector stood up a few times in this episode and really showed that, just that heart of, this really has to end. Like, this is really, and nobody else needs to get hurt because of it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that idea of having, just get behind me, you know what I mean? Like what you said, I think that that's the key piece too, is that's acknowledging, acknowledging you may not know what the right answer is, but that you understand that that's part of what people should be expecting from you, right? You're saying, I don't know the answer, right? Maybe I should, but I don't. But what I am going to do is I'm going to charge forward, and we're going to all follow, and we're going to, move together like that. And I think that's really important. I think one of the other things that I thought was interesting was Warren, Vasquez, or now, this new El Scorpion, right? What was part of the Bite Mark team and did a lot. And I think he took a very bad turn, right? Had sort of that mental break. And I think what was great about her was the loyalty she showed to who he was, right? Or what he had done. And with every, right up until the very last option of where that was no longer feasible, right, to try to give him the out, to try to bring him back, to try to work with him, she gave every opportunity, did everything in her power to try to pull him back to the light side, as it were. And I thought that was really great as a leader, because especially when not that everything is public, right? Most of the Bite Mark team wasn't there, but I think when you can show people that you're working together, like that you're a team, and that team means something, I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think leaders oftentimes forget that, right? They praise the this person was a top performer or something, and I think all that's important, right? You should highlight those things, but I think it's also important just to show, like, so it's a little bit more mundane, right? Of just trying to make sure people stay in the fold there. I think that was really cool, Warren.
I agree. And like you said, acknowledging the role that someone has played on your team, has played in your life, and giving them that, essentially extending that hand. And it's like, Warren does a really good job of, when she extends her hand, she's never pointing her fingers. She's always just like, You can come back here and all's forgiven, right? And we've seen her do that over and over. She did it with Hector. She did it with Sun May, right? Like all these different things. She's done it with Murphy multiple times. So it's like, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Warren has that is such a strength that even I think the best leaders, probably less than 10% have that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's not this for that. It's not a quid pro quo. Like everything that Hector did, if you were to balance that out, Mercy Z for Mercy Z, right? Like who protected whom from zombies more? It's probably a dead equal wash. But like it was, so it's not about what did you do for me, it's about what did you do for the mission, because so far if they're looking at it as everyone is putting in, right? They're all putting into this idea. Nobody's getting anything out of this idea. So but because they're still putting into the idea, he stepped away. That equity that he had built up in towards the mission, that still came out. And I think it's a more eloquent way of putting what I was trying to say before with, you know, I don't think that oftentimes that contribution that's made in is looked at as valuable by some leaders as it could be, because it's not a direct this for that, right? Or like, yeah, well, you did a lot of overtime last pay period and now you want some extra PTO. Well, we already gave you that because we gave you that we gave you the overtime pay, right? That's not exactly what we're looking for here. You know what I mean? Like it's about what did you add into that goal or that mission. So
Absolutely. Okay.